Okay, so we're back looking at chapter 5, self and identity. Uh, this is really a great chapter in the whole class. It's one of the central chapters to study because that's one of the mainstays of micro sociology or sociological social psychology. Such a long word, sociological social psychology. And it's a long one for psychology, psychological social psychology. That's a tongue tire, basically. Um, but anyway, one of the theories I really enjoy talking with students about, and we enjoy this in class, is the dramaturgical model of society, a dramaturgical sociology. And generally, in one of my intro classes, the first part of the chapter, which we've covered this, is looking at, again, statuses, roles, social structures, statuses, right? Status is a position in a social structure in which we enact roles. That sentence that we talk about. And I tell my students that when we talk about role theory, that it can be quite abstract, as you've already seen. It can be quite abstract, and we don't think that way, right? Like when I come to class, right, even on a video, I don't think in terms of, oh, now I gotta get into my professor status. I gotta get out of my musician status and move over into my and let me get my book of instructions on how to do that. So we don't think that way. Even sociologists don't think that way, but we think about it theoretically, right? Uh, so here comes along Irving Goffman, and especially in the 1960s, he was a symbolic interactionist, and Irving Goffman came up with this dramaturgical model. And what he was trying to say is what I was just saying is, okay, yeah, social status, social structure, roles, and all these things. Certainly, they do impact and they guide and shape people's daily behaviors, whatever groups they're interacting in. Uh, but what really motivates their behavior? Is it conformity to the rules? What really motivates people to do what society? Here's a good way to. I love this. People tend to do what society is required of them. People tend to do what society needs from them. So you can see that sort of. There's a sense of freedom for us. We do what we do, but we do it. But it seems we fulfill the needs of society by doing so. So by wanting to go to college, we conform our behavior in many ways, and that helps to make it happen, right? So the larger structure of education is supported by our conforming to the rules and regulations of the classroom, for example. So Irving Goffman came to the conclusion that people do follow the requirements, the role requirements of their statuses because they want to put their best foot forward. So we want to have for the most part, in most situations, we want to put our best foot forward. And the best way to do that is then to through impression management to make sure that we give the impressions off to our audience so that we are liked and we're accepted for what we're doing in that situation. So we try to put our best foot forward. And the dramaturgical model is not that. It's really not made up. It's not a very complex theory. Uh, so if you look at it, the dramaturgical model is made up of just a few concepts, really. One is you got impression management, and then you've got front stage and backstage. Impression management front stage and backstage, and even gives you some importance of self-presentation, some tips. And so this is both a theoretical model that's used. I've used it before in my research, and you can do whole research using, as you'll see in reading the chapter. So it can be used in that way. It can, but it also can be used in a practical sense for us, right, individually, in that it can help us come to understand that most of the time, in most situations, social encounters, people are involved in impression management. So one way that you can get an edge on, say, at a job interview is to know what the impression management could be, your prop, so to speak, that can help give you an advantage in that situation. So things like making sure that your CV is or application, it takes care of any contradiction in your timeline in terms of employment, so that if you get asked a question of what were you doing between these two jobs here, what was going on, so you want to cover yourself. So you want to, in your backstage preparation, you come up with what would work best. What was I doing? I can come up with good rationale to make it sound good instead of sounding negative. We have to cover ourselves. And then we work on our props, our physical props. So you got to dress the part for that particular, depends on what position it is. Whether you dress casual or you dress more formal. So if you go for a job interview for a professor's position, generally you're going to dress up at least with a sports coat on, a nice shirt, a pair of jeans, or a nice dress. You want to look, present like a professor should, stereotypically, right? I've known of situations when I've been on hiring committees where you've had a person come in. I'm thinking of one person in particular, a male, and man, he was dressed he was dressed so awful that it was just so apparent that he was so unkempt, and he was very good in other areas of his research and his teaching, but what really lost him the job was his dramaturgy, and he let down on his dramaturgical skills there. Sometimes it can be also attitude issues that can pop up, or temperament, this kind of thing that people aren't checking at the door. It can cause problems, and a lot of times we're subconscious to a lot of things we're not even aware of. And if you're an employer, and some of you I'm sure have been employers before, being on the other side of the table, you're making judgments. I tell my students this in class, and they always kind of, you can tell it shocks them, but I tell them that an employer generally, they tend to know where they're going to hire you within the first 30 seconds of meeting you, and so that don't give you a lot of time to impress somebody. You got to really come in with the right impression. So impression management is when let's look here in the book here. I don't usually do this, but in this case I will, and then I'll build on it a little bit. Impression management refers to the ways that individuals seek to control the impressions they convey to other people. Impression management is a social process involving those that, involving more than just our own behavior. For instance, you can try to impress a potential employer by wearing nice clothing, but cannot ensure that the employer finds the dress appropriate. In this way, there are impressions given and impressions given off. The impression you believe you are giving and the impression the other person has taken from you might be two different things. We're not always 100% sure of whether we're doing or what people are thinking. So what we have to do is do our best in our impression management to try to gain the impression we're trying to give so that people will buy into it. And, we as professors, we know that it doesn't even work in the classroom with students, because one student right next to you You might say, "Oh, I love this professor. They're easygoing. I love their flexibility. Blah blah blah. The way they dress, they're kind of cool. Blah blah." And then the other one next door says, "No, I don't like this professor. They're not really my kind of. They're not structured enough." Or so just between two people, their perceptions can be, even though you're given the same impression management. I always give this tip to students. One tip, for example, in class, especially if you're tough, you can't do this online. There's other things you can do online. But one thing you can do in class, and I used to do this once I caught on to impression management. I used to do this in my undergrad classes with my professors because I wanted them to know that I was wanting to be a grad student. I was going to graduate and become a master's student there, MA program. So, or even in the doctor program, I did the same thing. But if the professor's teaching on a certain chapter or theory, what you can do is to impress the instructor. First of all, is to sit on the front row. That professors always tend to look right at that front row. As man, they're sitting up here because they don't want to be distracted by. If you're sitting in the back row, it's kind of, oh, we hope. Now, I don't stereotype this because I've had the years of experience, but there can be a stereotype that people sitting in the back are not listening, or maybe are looking at their phones, or those on the front they're ready to go. They're here to work. That's an impression. So another thing you can do. What you can do is on that particular, he talks about Irving Goffman and dramaturgical model or something like that. Or what you can do next time for class is you get run to the bookstore or get run to the library and get out Goffman's books. Get out a couple of his books, or whatever the topic is. You can go to the library, look up in the bibliography here of their works. Go to the library and get there. You're talking about the sociological imagination. Go to the library and get C. Wright Mills's book, the Sociological Imagination. Have you 2 or 3 of those books. You come and sit on the front desk, and you set them right there on the front desk. Maybe even sort of like lay them out a little bit so the professor. And the professor might be milling around, looks down. He or she looks at those books, and they go, I see you got a Goffman's presentation of self in everyday life there. Hey? So you're going to read about it, huh? Right away, you're tallying up points with that professor and thinking, oh my gosh, we never see students hardly bring in textbooks sometimes, much less some of the authors that we're studying. My gosh, this person's really in it. So you can see how impression management works. Doing that, it gains you some points you put in your back pocket. And I did that a lot. And 9 times out of 10, I never read the books. Maybe I read them later on, but I would just take them back to the library and turn them in. Whatever the next group of concepts, theories coming up, I'd run and get some books and bring it into the class. And, you're reading so-and-so. What did you think about that? So, of course, I had to read enough of it to get some sense about it. But that can really pay off. But anyway, so impression management, we try to impress others to, in order to gain positive feedback from our audience. At the same time, by getting that personal gain, we're also doing what society needs us to do. That is, in order to get that, we have to conform our behavior to those expectations. And so we engage in impression. Now, some people think, well, impression management, that's being manipulative. Well, it can be. You can consciously, even the book here gives you a set of tips, right? Gives you a set of tips that you can follow. On page 130, the importance of self-presentations, some tips. And so they give you some right there. So you can manipulate it. But for the most part, most of us do it subconsciously. Most of the time we just, we're conforming our behavior to the social norms, to the statuses that we're in. even though we're not really aware of it. So in that sense, society's working behind our back, shaping our behavior. But in this sense, again, with symbolic interactionism, what is one of the things that we give more credence to? That's that freedom of agency, right? That we're less structured. Yes, the house is structured, but we can rearrange the furniture. We can negotiate things, right? So we're an active participant in this situation with the impression management. Then we have the front stage and backstage. So Goffman looked at impression management, looked at dramaturgy or everyday social life as he took it seriously that we're all just actors on the stage. We're all just playing our roles, right? In a sociological sense, that's true. And he developed the front stage and the backstage. So the front stage is when we're on the stage. So if I'm a professor in my class, my students, I am on cue. I'm on stage. The students, even though they're being docile and just giving me attention, they're also on stage, being in that classroom. So that's the front stage. If you go out on a date with somebody and you're having dinner, you're on stage. You're on the front stage right there with your partner, whoever you're with, and you'll lean on your impression management. I make fun about this relationship in class. I like to always talk about, guys and girls, men and women dating, and I use the impression management, and I kind of jokingly talk about how guys, when they first take out a lady, they'll try to do their impression management. Like they may bring them flowers, or they may take them to a really nice restaurant. And then for 2 hours, they may bore you or maybe make you excited about their lives. They're trying to make you come to the conclusion they're the most wonderful guy you ever met. They've done such wonderful things. Of course, females do the same thing. And then I asked my female students, have you ever dated a guy that when you first met them, you thought they were just great and wonderful, they're just the perfect male, and then 6 months later or less, you come to find this person's not the same person I met. Their behavior, and it's like Jekyll and Hyde, right? It's like, what happened to the person I met? This person's not the same. And students really enjoy that. A lot of times, how many females had that experience? And 99% of them will raise their hands. Then I kind of pick on the guys about that females do the same kinds of impression management. So you can use this in different contexts, in different ways. So we could do a study of the classroom and impression management between professor and students, how impression management is worked out on the front stage. Backstage is that area we go to basically it's an area where we can let our hair down. And the backstage is kind of like the area we can go to where things go on in the backstage that you would never go on the front stage, right? So a lot of times I use the kitchen, and I'll talk about the kitchen example good before I get here in a second. But we could talk about the front stage, the backstage. Well, man, the sky's the limit in terms of context you could study. I mean, really, you think about it. Anywhere people are interacting, and so any kind of like professions at work, sports team, relationships between doctors and patients, it's really the sky's the limit. But in the classroom, then the professor, for example, can use impression management by trying to be there on time. If they want to give a sense of they're a little bit laid back, they might dress informally, which I tend to do after I've been in class a few times. They may do a little bit of role distancing, that you get to know them a little bit. The professor, they may be relaxed in that way. So you're trying to gain points that way from your students. You want them to feel comfortable in your class, but you also want them to feel that you're competent. And so you've got to at least lecture some. Some professors try to get away with not lecturing at all. And sometimes they may get negative input because they're not sharing the knowledge that they have. Though I can also see, I try to, as well, I do also try to get the students to discover knowledge for themselves through interacting with other students in class, like we do in class with our discussions. But so that and the students, they do their impression managements as well. In various ways, come to class on time. I can watch my class as they're listening to me. I can tell when they're with me because their head is nodding. But I tell them, well, you're doing good dramaturgy when you're nodding at me because I can't really know what you're thinking. So you may be sitting there staring at me totally blank and nodding up and down. You always think, man, I can't wait till this Saturday. I'm going to this party on Saturday. I'm going to this concert to see such and such Friday night. I can't wait. You might be thinking about all kinds of, you may not even be with me. You may not even be in the room in your head, but it doesn't matter to me because you're with me. And what you're doing by deferring to me and watching me, you're giving me the chance to do what I'm doing. So you're not disrupting class. And by giving your attention, your perceived attention, that makes my job possible to do. And you can go right on to all kinds of different situations. Presidential debates, presidential campaigns. You think of the impression management that goes into getting a candidate ready to go out in front of the public. They've got sociologists, psychologists, you name it. Maybe astrologers, if they believe in it, working for them to help get them put together and stuck out there in front of, say, hey, here I am, I'm so unique, They got a lot of impression management, so much so that when they finally win an election, then we're let down because they didn't do anything they said they were going to do, which is a lot of times true. I'll give you one more example from my own experience, though, with the front stage and backstage. One of the best examples is if any of you have ever worked as a kitchen help or as a waiter, waitress, you know what we're talking about. So the front stage in a restaurant or cafe is the front stage is going to be where the people are sitting. It's where the waiter is to go out to, take their orders and do their thing. That's the front stage. So where's the backstage in these places? Even in places like McDonald's, for example. Backstage is in the kitchen, right? You're out of the public view there. Sometimes waiters have a waiter station right off from the kitchen, and they can see people coming in and out. And that's their back region. And there's, as you know, there's things that go on in the kitchen that would never be exposed to the public. And I can remember working, because when I was in Nashville, that was my day job. That was my real job, because I was a waiter. And I waited on tables in both fine restaurants, 5-star restaurants, as well as pizza parlors. So I saw a lot about him. I learned a lot about impression management working in that setting. And so in one situation, I was working for it was a continental French also restaurant, and it was formal, and the most formal restaurant I had ever worked in. And I was somewhat not ready. I was more informal, working in cafes and this kind of thing, more informal types of waiting. This was formal, where we had we had to wear a tuxedo when we were waiting on people. And at night, one of the pluses for me is a lot of the music industry people would come to this restaurant. So I saw a lot of music stars. I saw movie stars. I got to meet them. I saw politicians like Al Gore and his wife Tipper at the time. He had just finished being the lieutenant governor at the time of Tennessee. I waited on his table and really enjoyed a time with him, and all kinds of different musicians and producers, and a couple of movie peoples and movie crews. So I enjoyed that part of it. And a lot of times during the day, I would actually play music on Friday nights they had a boxing ring downstairs, and they'd have me get up there on the stage before the boxing match started, and during their happy hour, and I would play music there, and I knew that there was record people in the audience, and they were there for happy hour, and got to meet people that way a bit. But anyway, so I started out then as a waiter, and I was very nervous. And a lot of the other waiters, most of them were professional waiters. They'd been doing it all their lives, and most of them were all either from Nashville. Some of them were from New York, had worked in high class restaurants in New York and Baltimore and different places. So I was quite intimidated by it. And so the first night I was there, this wealthy family came in, and they told me to go ahead. This is your first chance. We're going to let you go on out, And so I went out, and in my impression management, wanted to do my best, and I pulled the chair out for the lady, the lady of the family, and would be my luck. When I pulled the seat out, there was a big old plate of spaghetti this big sitting in her seat. Somebody had spilt this plate. I don't know if it was done intentionally. All I know is here I am, right? Now, she was shocked by it. Sometimes people get offended by this kind of thing, like, how dare you, So I had to really apologize, get some of the other guys to come out and remove the chair, get that out of the way, bring in another chair. So I was already off to a bad start. And then when I got to where I was trying to take the order, I ran into a couple of French items on the menu that I was not able to pronounce. I made a mispronunciation of one of the dishes, and so the family had a big uproar about it. They were laughing. They thought it was the funniest thing how I said that. Of course, they knew I was a Southerner for sure because of my accent. So, they were really giving me a hard time. So hard, and it ended up being so hard a time at starting out like that I saw from over in the corner at the waiter station there, they were doing this, come. So I came on over and they said, listen, man, what we're going to do to help get you trained I'm going to take over from where you're at now, and we're going to make you the back waiter. So the back waiter was the waiter. The kitchen was upstairs. And so the back waiter was a person, if you've worked in these situations, I would go up the stairs. A lot of times I'd wait up there until the chef would finish the plates and put them out on the platter. I would take them and put them on the platter, take the large platter and walk downstairs and put it on the stand for the waiters themselves to take out. So a back waiter. And so the way it was supposed to work was at the end of the night, the waiters were supposed to give me a percent of their tips. I was always suspicious about how that really played out, but it was better than nothing. So, especially starting out. So they promised me later, we'll get you in as a waiter. We're going to start you out as to let you, observe, basically. So I started, and I was in a good position for me to think about impression management. Of course, I wasn't thinking about this at all at that time. But there was a Hispanic. Our chef was a formally trained, high class chef. He had worked in the large cities all over the United States, and he. So I first met him. He came in. He came in, just street clothes, and he took his clothes off, and he had on this just a open arm T-shirt, and so that's what he worked in. But I noticed he had gauze on both his arms and burns, and he had these big ovens all around him, and they're hot. And he had third-degree burns, hitting things, and he was very quick, and he was he didn't play around with you, so you had to be on your toes with him because So here we are in the backstage. So this is the backstage in the kitchen, front stage out there front. So back there in the backstage, he was a character. He he had 2 big jugs of wine on each side of his fires going there in his frying pan. He had red wine. He had gallon of Gallo of white wine, and with his various dishes, he would pour the wines in, and the flames would come up. And it was like Haiti. It was like hell on earth. Hot. He was sweaty, and but a master at what he was doing. So he'd have those plates looking just perfect, and he wanted you to make sure that it was perfect when you delivered it downstairs. Every once in a while, he might drop a steak and he would wash it off and put it back in the frying pan and keep right on cooking it up. But I noticed as going through the night that he would take swigs of the wine as he would cook. He was cooking by himself. He'd have several dishes going all at once, but he would be pouring the wines in, and then he would drink. So I noticed about halfway through the night he was getting kind of tipsy, And the more tipsy he got, the meaner he got to some degree. And his language was quite nasty. I mean, he really laid into us when we weren't on our toes. And so anyway, at the end of the night, one of the waiters came up and said to the chef, "Hey," he said, "so-and-so, a big music person in the music industry. He wants you to come down. They want to talk to you. They want to compliment you on the food tonight. And they want to give you a tip." He said, "Oh, okay. So you guys," he said, "you just lay back and take over here." He said, "I got to go out." And so he went here. He was with sweaty. He had on his t-shirt. He went in his back room. He put on a very nice crisp chef jacket. Put on his nice big white chef's hat. Cleaned himself up. And he headed downstairs. When he headed downstairs, some of the other mature, experienced waiters said, come on down. Let's follow him and watch him. I want you to watch him." So when he went out there, he went from just being, high from drinking his whiskey and being loud and carrying on to being straight as an arrow, right? He walked out there, took his hat off, kind of bowed to the people, big smile on his face, and he's talking they're like, "Oh, what ingredients did you use in such and this?" And he's telling them the ingredients and talking about this and that. And he was just charming everybody, And after he was finished, I saw him giving him a bill, and giving him $100 bill. And as he walked past us, he kind of gave us a little smile and wink, and he was wagging that money in our face. I thought, man, when I think about it, that was a great example of impression management. And people can be experts at it. Some people can use impression management, maybe they don't even know about it, but can use impression management so well that they can be criminals, You've heard all these many cases where a guy seems so wonderful, and he uses certain impression techniques that gets him involved in a relationship with, say, a widow, and ends up thinking that he marries her or he's moved in, and they think he's always just the most wonderful person in the world, and he's been just lying to her the whole time. He ends up taking her money, So yes, impression management can be consciously done and done for the wrong reasons. But it's just a great theory for everyday sociologists to study. Just you can sit down and think about what kind of interactions could you use to talk about impression management. You can come up with just myriad examples. If you wanted to ride with the police and you want to do an impression, and if you wanted to do a dramaturgy of the police force study, then what you could do is ride with them and go out with them and see how they deal with the public. See how they use their front stage with the public. How do they deal with people? And then what are they like in the back regions? So you're going to want to get. One of the things I like to say about the back region is That's really sociological because as you know, studying sociology, we really want to know what's really going on. One way to find out what's really going on is to get into that back region where people have let their hair down, and they're not things that go on in the back region will never go on in front of the public, right? Even with professors, I talk about this in class. Uh, Students have their subculture and we have our subculture. So as faculty, uh, when we're not around students and we're like in our break room having lunch together, something, we'll talk about students. We'll talk about, oh, I got this student, someone said, they're a great student. Maybe the rest of you got this student. Oh, you're talking about someone say, yeah, oh, yeah, they're a great student. And vice versa. If we have a real troublemaker, I bring that one up too and say, have you guys had so-and-so in your class? Oh, man. Have you got them in your class? Oh, no. Difficult to deal with, huh? But this kind of stuff. But that's the back region. We can also, talk about things. So what we're doing is basically we're seeing things in our back region that we would never say in the classroom, right? And the same thing with students do this too all the time. And, students are always eager, especially freshmen, wanting to understand who to take, who not to take. And that's an important knowledge to have as a freshman or a sophomore, because the seniors, they kind of already know the ropes and they know who you should take and who you shouldn't take. So a senior sometimes will say to a freshman, oh, you're taking Sociology 101, who are you taking it with? And Dr. Someone say, oh, man, you shouldn't have taken him. He's going to or she's going to be rough on you. You're going to be in there all day. You're going to have papers to write. You got the hardest test you ever had, And when I was a student in Michigan, they actually had the student subculture had this book that came out of the dorms, and it came out of the fraternities, and it was a whole list of who to take and who not to take. And so they actually had the professors' names, and they would actually have a star and like a gold star, and they'll say like, take this professor because they're cool, and they're good. You'll enjoy working with them, and they'll have another one. I remember one that was kind of funny. It said Doctor Payne. Then next to it said, as name implies, and stays in class from the time when class begins to its end. Gives 4 hard tests, has 2 papers to do, don't take very hard, or they'll say something about their temperament. It was a subcultural text that wasn't shared with faculty. I was able to get a student to share it with me because I thought, hey, I'm a sociologist, so I would be eager to see what goes on, in the subculture. And of course, I wanted to look up my own name, and they gave me a good rating, so I felt good about that. Anyway, so that's my take on dramaturgical sociology, and I hope that you'll have the opportunity to run into it some more, whether in this class or other classes. So I'm going to go ahead and take off, and I'll be sending you another announcement here soon. And again, for office hours, if you want to talk to me, just let me know, and we'll set up a time, and we can either talk by chat or we can talk by phone if you'd rather. Depends on what the topic is. I don't mind calling students if it's something that would be better worked out through us talking live that way. So anyway, so I'll let you guys go, and I'll see you next time.